This is very important because throughout the years, black artists have been taken advantage of completely.
Before you label or condemn me, don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
It's ridiculous for anybody to think that hip-hop music is just music. And so when you have corporate-owned entities that are not from the black community encouraging African-American men to market a lifestyle that is stunting the growth of millions of young black men across the country, we have to be offended by the fact that they are annihilating our families. They are chopping us down.
What is the price of fame? To be recognized the world over, and yet known by relatively few. What would you do for the money? The finest homes, cars, clothes, and adoration of millions of fans. Do these celebrities truly hold the power and influence that they project? Influence the lives and attitudes of others? What to buy, what to drive, what to wear? Or are they simply slaves to a much bigger machine with much more devious intentions? In this special report, we examine the lives of the rich, famous, and wealthy celebrity elite, and the sometimes eternal price that some will pay in hopes of becoming a legend.
Talent and skill you have in abundance. What you lack is a story. With me at your side, you will never have to worry about a thing again. I will handle everything. I will be your servant and your slave, so that all you have to do is that which you love. Play your music and be recognized.
October 27, 1782. Nicola Paganini, otherwise known as the Devil's Violinist, is born in Genoa, Italy. Rumor was that Paganini's mother was the one who had made the deal with the devil himself, exchanging her son's soul for the chance to be the greatest violinist in history. And great he was, tall, thin, hollow cheeks, long fingers, dark eyes, and he dressed in all black. His virtuosity combined with his gangly looks and dark demeanor mesmerized audiences, many even claiming that doppelgangers would be sitting in the audiences helping him along, sometimes adding that these doppelgangers had horns, hooves, tails, red clothes. One report even claiming that the devil himself once caused lightning to strike the end of Paganini's bow. Paganini was a sickly man, retiring at the age of 54. He would ultimately die in France in 1840, and his refusal of his last rites only sparked more rumors of his supposed deal with the devil. Despite being a member of the Order of the Golden Spur, granted by Pope Leo XII, Paganini's local church refused to bury his body on consecrated ground. Paganini wasn't the first, and most certainly not the last, of many Faustian deals within the music industry. Now, if Tommy was living, he'd tell you. He said the reason he knowed so much said he sold himself to the devil. I asked him how. He said if you want to learn how to play anything you want to play, and learn how to make songs yourself, you take your guitar and you go to where a road crosses that way, where Crossroads is. Get there. Be sure to get there just a little before 12 o'clock that night so you know you'll be there. You have your guitar and be playing a piece there by yourself. A big black man will walk up there and take your guitar, and he'll tune it. And then he'll play a piece and hand it back to you. That's the way I learned to play anything I want.
IPOT, yeah, she gave me gasoline.
Those were the words of bluesman Tommy Johnson, as told by his brother and bandmate Liddell. Tommy Johnson was born around 1896 on George Miller's plantation near Terry, Mississippi. One of 13 children, Tommy came from a musical family, including brother Liddell, who originally taught Tommy how to play the guitar. In a few years, the Johnson brothers would be making extra income from their sharecropping by playing parties at night. But soon Tommy would get his wish, cutting his first records in 1928 in Memphis, Tennessee, under the Victor record label. During those sessions, Tommy recorded the infamous Canned Heat Blues, in which he describes drinking Sterno to get his alcohol fix. He would later record for Paramount in December of 1929, where other Delta legends such as Son House, Skip James, and Charlie Patton had recorded. Tommy was famous for his eerie yodeling-style vocals. He would wail and howl, and his spooky falsetto would later influence numerous blues artists such as Howlin' Wolf and the band Canned Heat, whose name had been inspired from the Tommy Johnson classic. Johnson embraced his dark and sinister reputation and began to style himself similar to that of St. Louis bluesman Petey Wheatstraw, who was also known as the Devil's son-in-law. To add to the dark mystique, Johnson would often display a large rabbit's foot and incorporate theatrics into his performance. His brother Liddell would later tell the tale that Tommy had sold his soul at a crossroads. Tommy would simply refer to his personality as Old Scratch. As brother Liddell recalls, Tommy had described the personality as a large black man. Years later, a nod to Tommy Johnson's story would be depicted in the Hollywood film Oh Brother Where Art Thou, with a slight alteration.
Let's give that colored boy a lift. You folks going past Tishomingo? Sure, hop in.
How you doing, son? Name's Everett. These two soggy sons of bitches are Pete and Delmer. Keep your fingers away from Pete's mouth. He ain't had nothing to eat for 13 years except prison food, gopher, and a little greasy horse.
Thanks for the lift, sir. My name's Tommy Johnson.
How you doing, Tommy? Say, I haven't seen a house out here for miles. What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had to be at that there crossroads last midnight. Sell my soul to the devil.
Well, ain't it a small world, spiritually speaking? Pete and Delmer just been baptized and saved. I guess I'm the only one that remains unaffiliated.
This ain't no laughing matter, Everett.
What'd the devil give you for your soul, Tommy?
Well, he taught me to play this here guitar real good.
Oh, son. For that, you traded your everlasting soul?
Well, I wouldn't use them. I've always wondered, what's the devil look like?
Well, of course, there are all manner of lesser imps and demons, Pete, but the great Satan himself is red and scaly with a bifurcated tail, and he carries a hay fork.
Oh, no. No, sir. He's white. As white as you folks. With empty eyes and a big hollow voice. He loved to travel around with a mean old hound. That's right.
The legend of the Crossroads would later be told in perhaps one of the most famous Faustian tales, that of Robert Dodds, born around May 1911, the 11th child born to Julia Dodds. Julia had been married to Charles Dodds, who had fathered all of Robert's brothers and sisters. When a lynch mob forced Charles to flee Mississippi from Memphis, Tennessee, Robert would soon discover that Charles Dodds was not his real father. Dodds grew up using multiple aliases, including Robert Spencer and Robert Dusty. But by the time he was a young teenager, he had finally discovered the true identity of his real father, a sharecropper from Hazelhurst, Mississippi, named Noah Johnson. This is when Robert would officially rename himself to Robert Leroy Johnson. Johnson was already a proficient harmonica player, but it was the guitar that was his real passion. Legendary bluesman Son House recalls Johnson as being a terrible guitar player, even running him off stage himself after the audience had complained about all his noise making. Johnson wouldn't be seen for months after that, but by the time he returned, he had become the best guitarist in all of Mississippi. Such a radical change had sparked rumors that, like his predecessor Tommy, unrelated, Robert too had sold his soul at the Crossroads. One of those there to witness Johnson's sudden transformation included a young McKinley Morganfield, who had grown up near Clarksdale, Mississippi, where Johnson often performed. Johnson's performances would inspire Morganfield to become a bluesman himself and would later change his name to Muddy Waters. Others believed that Johnson had simply disappeared to study under his mentor, Ike Zimmerman, an Arkansas bluesman who had also been rumored to have acquired his skills by supernatural means. Whether or not the stories were true, Robert Johnson, like his contemporaries, would embrace his dark persona, going on to write such classics such as Crossroad Blues, Me and the Devil Blues, and Hellhound on My Trail. Johnson's music would go on to inspire numerous artists for decades to come. But his real life would be short-lived. As the story goes, around August of 1938, Johnson was performing at a barn dance outside Greenwood, Mississippi. 3 days later, his body was found on the side of the road. Many speculated he had been poisoned by a jealous husband of a woman he had been dating. He was just 27, and the first member of what would later become known as the infamous 27 Club. Pacts with the devil have been a long-running theme amongst musicians of various genres, but it was largely the blues that popularized this idea, presenting itself as a liberating alternative to the gospel-inspired music of the Deep South. This is likely why the blues would often be referred to as the devil's music, which was performed in juke joints, speakeasies, and creep joints, which had sprung up throughout the entire southeast region. In 1913, the New York Times wrote, "Decent people in and out of the church are beginning to be alarmed at the crude and vulgar music and loose conduct accompanying it, with dances defying all propriety." Stories of these popular musicians would do little to dispel these ideas, whether it be Son House Jr., who in 1928 was convicted for shooting and killing Leroy Lee at a house party, or Huddy Ledbetter, otherwise known as Leadbelly, who in December of 1917 was arrested and charged with the murder of Will Stafford. In 1925, Texas Governor Pat Neff pardoned Leadbelly after writing a song expressly for the governor. After his release, Leadbelly moved to Houston, then later to Mooringsport. But in January of 1930, he was involved in another incident, this time stabbing a Salvation Army officer. He was convicted and given a sentence of 6 to 10 years at the Angola prison. Due to budget restrictions brought on by the Great Depression, Leadbelly was able to secure an early release. It was at this time Leadbelly would sign a management contract with John Lomax and do a series of recordings for the American Record Corporation, which also owned Columbia Records. Leadbelly would find himself in trouble once again in March of 1939, when he was arrested for stabbing a man in New York. But one of the most influential was that of 1930s blues singer William Bunch, otherwise known as Petey Wheatstraw, also known as the Devil's Son-in-Law and the High Sheriff from Hell. Wheatstraw composed a number of songs known as stomps. His demonic persona and hardened attitude would later pave the way for the modern-day rap star. Blues critic Tony Russell said of Wheatstraw, "Wheatstraw constructed a macho persona that made him the spiritual ancestor of rap artists." Wheatstraw was also an inspiration for a character in the 1952 novel Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, who had also penned the 1954 novel Juneteenth. Invisible Man was an odyssey of a young African-American man who travels from the American South to New York City in search of his identity. Ellison was introduced to literary radicalism and communism from people like Louise Patterson, Langston Hughes, and Richard Wright, who was a member of the Communist Party and had mentored Ellison in the ideas of Marxism. Although Ellison publicly denied any relationship to Marxism or communism, He was a Stalinist from about 1938 to 1944, and references to a group known as the Brotherhood in Invisible Man seem to be a clear metaphor to the Communist Party. The leader of the Brotherhood in the novel is simply known as Brother Jack, who was a white man, manipulative, racist, and condescending. It's unknown whether or not Ellison was a member of the Communist Party, but in the 2007 biography of Ellison and Barbara Foley's 2010 book, Wrestling with the Left, The Making of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, Foley discovers papers simply known as a branch control record that suggests the possibility. Either way, the Invisible Man would serve as a model for the 1995 memoir Dreams from My Father, written by Barack Obama, and largely believed to have been ghostwritten by Bill Ayers, co-founder of the radical 1970s group The Weather Underground, and known communist. There are some that believe Invisible Man was a codex of some sort, full of gematria, suggesting future events such as 9/11, a divide and conquer strategy, and even Ellison's own death. According to a New York Times book review, the geography of hell is still in the process of being mapped. Invisible Man belongs on the shelf with the classical efforts man made to chart the river Leith from the mouth to its source, Leith being one of the 5 rivers of the underworld of Hades. P.D. Wheatstraw would also go on to inspire films such as the blaxploitation comedy horror film of the same name, P.D. Wheatstraw, The Devil's Son-in-Law, starring comedian Rudy Ray Moore, Jimmy Lynch, and Leroy Daniels. In the film, P.D. exacts revenge on a gang that guns down his business partner, aided by Lou Cypher, the devil himself, while using his own magic pimp cane. He receives help from the devil on one condition, that P.D. marry the devil's daughter and provide him with a grandson. Rudy Ray Moore's portrayal of P.D. Wheatstraw, as well as another popular blaxploitation film character, Dolomite, were huge inspirations for a number of modern-day rappers, including that of Snoop Dogg, who adopted the pimp persona of Moore's characters, similar to that of the original P.D. Wheatstraw. Like the original bluesman, modern-day hip-hop artists would begin to stylize themselves after the dark, brooding, and devilish characters that had earned the genre's moniker of the devil's music, and whose artists had illustrated the legends, most of them being inspired from tales told near Clarksdale, Mississippi, somewhere near the crossroads of Highways 49 and 61.
And we just feel that one of the primary duties of a rapper in this day and age is to become a positive role model in the minds and in the hearts of the children, because a lot of these kids don't have positive role models to look up to. In most neighborhoods, drug dealers are a role model.
We're totally against black on black crime, you know. I mean, it's so ridiculous in this day and time that our own brothers and sisters has got to pick up arms against one another. You know, we're killing ourselves off, man. And this is a definite message to all the young people.
We strongly believe that, you know, violence is nonsense, and we got to get together as one. And if you look around, you see a whole lot of different type of rappers here getting together to prove that everybody can get together.
It's time for people in the rap music industry to begin to address not only their image problem, but the real issues that are causing the problem for the community. And so we decided to start the Stop the Violence movement.
Songs, but you had been working in another field, had you?
That's right, I was doing spirituals at the time.
All right, what caused you at that point in your career of 57 to turn to this kind of singing?
My economic situation.
January 22nd, 1931. Another Clarksdale, Mississippi legend is born. Sam Cooke, singer, songwriter, entrepreneur, and pioneer of soul. Cooke's angelic vocals and devilishly good looks would astonish audiences from a young age, starting off performing with his siblings in a group simply known as the Singing Children. By 15, he became the lead singer of the Soul Stirrers. And by 1957, Cooke had gone solo, releasing a slew of hits, including You Send Me, A Change Is Gonna Come, Cupid, Wonderful World, Chain Gang, Twistin' the Night Away, Bring It On Home to Me, and Good Times. 29 singles charting in the Billboard Top 40, and 20 of them in the Top 10. Cooke had drawn his inspiration from fellow Clarksdale native Muddy Waters, as well as John Lee Hooker, and was one of the first African-American recording artists to own his own record label and publishing company. In January of 1960, Cooke signed with the Victor record label, which was now RCA Victor, and was offered a guaranteed $100,000 by the label's producers. In 1961, Cooke started his own record label, SAR Records, with J.W. Alexander and his manager Roy Crane. The label would include the Sims Twins and the Valentinos, featuring Bobby Womack and his brothers. In 1963, Cooke signed a 5-year deal with manager Allen Klein to manage Cag's Music and SAR Records, and made him the manager. Allen Klein had also managed the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Cooke's messy personal and professional life would ultimately lead to a mysterious death, sparking numerous conspiracy theories that would continue up until today. Cooke had been married twice, the first time to singer-dancer Dolores Elizabeth Milligan Cooke, who was also known as Dee Dee Mohawk. They divorced in 1958. Not long afterwards, in 1959, Mohawk was killed in an auto collision in Fresno, California. Cooke married his second wife in 1958, Barbara Campbell, in Chicago, with his own father performing the wedding ceremony. Sam had gotten Barbara pregnant, and his father suggested that they marry to preserve his clean image. Barbara had an affair with 19-year-old Bobby Womack, whom she would later marry less than 3 months after Cooke's death. Womack sexually abused Cooke's oldest daughter, Linda, who later married Womack's brother Cecil Womack. They became the duo Womack and Womack. It was manager Allen Klein who had helped Sam set up a holding company called Tracy Limited, named after Sam's second daughter. And although Sam was the president of Tracy Limited, he was not the owner. The official documents stated that Klein was the owner, and there were allegations that Klein had manipulated the paperwork and had given phony documents to Cooke. This would result in Klein owning all the rights to Cooke's recordings. Sam had discovered this and was planning to fire Klein. Sam was also planning to divorce Barbara, as he knew about her infidelity, and the final straw came when their 2-year-old son died by falling into the pool while Barbara was on the phone with another man. On December 11, 1964, Cooke was killed at the age of 33 at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles, California. The official story is that Cooke spent the evening in Martoni's Italian restaurant in Hollywood, where he met 22-year-old Elisa Boyer. A few hours later, the two got into Cooke's red Ferrari and headed to El Segundo, where they ended up at the Hacienda Motel. According to Boyer, she had asked him to take her home, but Cooke decided to take her to the Hacienda, which was known for its $3 an hour rates. Boyer contends that Cooke had attempted to rape her, and she ran to the manager's office and knocked on the door seeking help. But she had left the motel room with almost all of Cooke's clothing. According to the motel's manager, Bertha Franklin, Cooke had banged on the door of her office shouting, "Where's the girl?" When Franklin grappled with Cooke, Franklin retrieved a gun and fired at Cooke in self-defense, striking him in the torso. Cooke would then exclaim, "Lady, you shot me." He would advance on her once again. Franklin then said she hit him in the head with a broomstick, when he finally fell to the floor and died. Although there were numerous inconsistencies with the coroner's report, Franklin's version of the story returned a verdict of justifiable homicide, seeing as both Boyer and Franklin had passed polygraph tests. But members of Cooke's family, supporters, and friends have rejected this version of the events, stating that Cooke's body appeared to have been badly beaten. Fellow soul singer Etta James, who had attended Cooke's funeral, stated in her book Rage to Survive that she believes Sam had been drugged, set up, and beaten by numerous attackers, possibly with ties to the mafia, saying, quote, "In truth, I saw this at the funeral home. Sam's head was practically disconnected from his shoulders. That's how badly he had been beaten. His hands were broken and crushed. Sam had a cute little straight nose that, if you looked closely at his corpse, was badly mangled. They tried to cover it up with makeup, but I could see massive bruises on his head. No woman with a broomstick could have inflicted that kind of beating against a full-grown, strong man. Those of us who discussed it, his friends and family, figured that the Mickey must have worn off at some point. That's when Sam started struggling with the guys who were trying to take him out. They beat him, shot him, and concocted this far-out story that no reasonable person could believe. To suspect Klein of involvement in the death of Sam Cooke wasn't exactly a stretch. Klein had a long history of shrewd negotiation tactics and ruthless dealings, as well as known mob ties. Klein was known for using buy and sell agreements, where companies that Klein owned became intermediaries between his clients and the record labels. This would allow Klein to own the rights to the music, manufacture the records, selling them back to the record label, and paying the musicians royalties in cash advances. This would appear enticing to the musicians for their upfront royalties, but would often end up benefiting Klein in the long run. Both the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, two of the largest bands in history, had spent years in litigation with Klein over withheld royalty payments and stolen publishing rights, which earned Klein tens of millions of dollars. The Beatles' Paul McCartney famously refused to sign the contract with Klein, but was outvoted by the other Beatles. This resulted in McCartney suing the Beatles, and was one of the reasons, along with production decisions, that McCartney left the band in 1970. Here John Lennon discusses his regret on working with Klein on an April 1973 episode of Weekend World.
When did you personally decide that Klein probably wasn't the man you thought he was?
Well, you're concluding that I thought he was something, you know. My position has always been the devil in the deep blue sea, and at the time I do whatever I feel is right. And although I haven't been particularly happy personally for quite a long time with the situation, I didn't want to make any quick moves, and I wanted to see if maybe, you know, something could work out.
Do you regret signing that contract with Klein now, looking back?
Which contract?
The basic master management contract.
Can you?
That might be the one we least regret.
That's very enigmatic. What does it mean?
Well, Mr. Klein's contracts are amazing.
You
That's
mean
all
there's
I'll say
strings
about
and
them.
strings on them?
No. They're called the opposite, you know.
As Lennon suggested, Klein was a mathematical genius and a master at analyzing contracts by offering his artists hundreds of thousands of dollars up front, simply by scrutinizing their existing contracts and locating the fine print areas in which record companies were taking advantage of the artists, only to eventually restructure their contracts and do the very same thing, and in many cases, walking away with publishing rights, as was the case with Sam Cooke. Klein had negotiated Cooke's deal with RCA, securing him $100,000 after an audit on his royalties, in which Klein would earn 25%. After Sam's death, Klein eventually bought out Cooke's widow's publishing interest for $350,000, and Klein's ABKCO Records would own the rights to Sam's lucrative music. He did this with the help of his fixer, lawyer Martin J. Machat, who was known as his legal sledgehammer. Machat was a pioneer in the music law business going back to the 1950s, representing clients such as Sugar Ray Robinson, James Brown, Dinah Washington, Clyde Otis, the Rolling Stones, ELO, Genesis, and Sly and the Family Stone. Klein and Machat had earned their reputations as rough-minded businessmen in an even rougher music industry, which was rife with mob activity, and nothing would illustrate this fact more than Klein's subjugation of Roulette Records CEO and notorious mob agent Morris Levy. Levy was a childhood friend of Vincent the Chin Gigante, a known enforcer for the Genovese crime family, and had often used strong-arm tactics to rob numerous artists of their hard-earned royalties. Yet even Gigante was quick to cough up thousands of dollars in withheld funds on behalf of Klein's clients, rockabilly musicians Buddy Knox and Jimmy Bowen. It was this situation which had led Cooke to work with Klein in the first place. Klein, by way of Machat, used heavy persuasion techniques to coerce RCA into auditing Cooke's contract. It was only a few months after Cooke's hiring of Klein that Sam Cooke would end up dead. He was 33.
He wasn't doing nothing. Sam Cooke, hey, let that man up here. No, wait, hold it now. Let that man up. He's coming up. Let that man up. He's coming up. Now listen, Cassius, hold it. This is Sam Cooke. Joe, we see him. Joe, ask Cassius another question. Let's stay on here. This is the one. All right, Jab. All right. Listen, shoulder went out. Sam Cooke, a very good friend, a good vocalist with Cassius. Excuse me. Move back if you will. Take up the world. Now he's got it too. Hold it. Thank you.
The exact events and motives surrounding Sam Cooke's death may never be known, but it served as a warning to young musicians, especially black musicians, who would wish to take control over their own destiny. Sam's desire to have control over his intellectual property was a threat to the existing power structure that ran and would continue to run the entertainment industry, whether mob-influenced or not, for decades to come. But Sam was also becoming a civil rights activist, having developed close friendships with boxing champion Muhammad Ali and civil rights leader Malcolm X. These friendships would go on to create big problems for all three men, two of whom would die within the year of Ali's famous knockout of Sonny Liston in February of 1964. 3 years later, on December 10, 1967, one day shy of the exact date of Cooke's death, R&B singer Otis Redding would suffer a similar mysterious fate when his plane crashed into Lake Monona, Wisconsin, about 3 to 4 miles short of the intended landing runway at the Madison, Wisconsin airport. Also killed in the crash was pilot Richard Frazier and members of his band, the Bar-Kays, Jimmy King, Ronnie Caldwell, Phelan Jones, Carl Cunningham, and Matthew Kelly. Trumpet player Ben Cawley was the only one to survive the crash. Despite an investigation by the NTSB, the cause of the crash was not determined, although there had been poor weather that day. The Beechcraft H-18S that they were flying in was sold to Redding by James Brown, the godfather of soul, who wrote in his autobiography that when he sold the twin-engine craft to Redding, he had warned him against flying it. Early police reports had mentioned a small dark gray attaché case that was recovered from the lake, which was believed to have contained cash. This would be absent in later reports, and although some doubted the existence of the case, Redding's widow, Zelma Redding, had said that he had taken it on the plane. According to one account from farmer Chris Dickert in Evansville, he and neighbor Bernie Reese had heard the accident happen. They hurried out in Reese's boat to help the situation when they pulled a gray attaché case with the initials OR out of the water. This, along with the statement of Zelma Redding, would suggest that there was indeed an attaché case, although the contents and whereabouts remain unknown. Like Cooke, Redding was planning to take his career into his own hands, having founded Red Wall Music with Walden brothers Phil and Allen, which would later become Capricorn Studios, which would go on to be closely associated with the Allman Brothers and the Southern Rock sound. Redding died only 3 days after recording what would be one of his largest hits, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. He was 26 years old. He would never hear the song played on the radio. Otis Redding had owned Otis Redding Enterprises, and although his performances, publishing ventures, and royalties earned him more than $1 million in 1967 alone, it was later discovered that Atlantic Records held the rights to all his unreleased masters, enough for 3 studio albums, including Hard to Handle, I've Got Dreams to Remember, and Love Man. Sam Cooke and Otis Redding's celebrity were growing as big as the music they made, but both singers were also becoming close with certain Muslim groups, which ignited rumors that either the Mafia or other entities were interested in silencing them. In the book Otis Redding, An Unfinished Life by Jonathan Gold, Gold interviews Redding's manager Phil Warden, who said, quote, "He went through about a 3-month deal with a black Muslim group that strained the relationship greatly. There was even an interview in a black Muslim magazine that Otis was going to announce his intentions to become a Muslim, a claim that has since been refuted. But either way, the deaths of both performers remain a mystery." Whether or not either singer were planning to convert to Islam were true, the rumors were out there and appeared to be relevant. Cooke had a close relationship with Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, both who had been involved, and later jaded, with the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X had become highly critical of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, saying that the same people funding them were the very same funding right-wing or white supremacist groups such as the KKK.
And I guess many of you have heard it said that his financial support comes from a rich man in Texas. I heard that while I was in the movement. I've heard it more since I left the movement. A rich man in Texas. You can look up, any of you can look up his name. But the FBI knows that too. But they still don't touch him. And never have I seen a man, and this rich man who lives in Texas, by the way, lives in Dallas. His headquarters in Dallas. His money is in Dallas. The same cities where President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And never have I seen a man in my life more afraid, more frightened than Elijah Muhammad was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I've never in my life seen a man as frightened as he was. And when I made the statement that I did, why, he almost cracked up behind it, because there were all kinds of implications to it that at that time were way above and beyond my understanding.
The rich man being referred to is H.L. Hunt, at one time one of the richest men in the U.S., an American oil tycoon who had originally traded his poker winnings in exchange for oil rights. His 15 children have gone on to become highly influential as well, including Nelson Bunker Hunt, who was a major force in developing oil fields in Libya and attempting to corner the world market in silver. He was convicted of conspiracy to manipulate the market. Son Lamar Hunt was co-founder of the American Football League, owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, and later created the Dallas Texans and Chicago Bulls, and had coined the name Super Bowl. Ray Lee Hunt, chairman of Hunt Oil. June Hunt, host of religious radio show Hope for the Heart, and Swanee Hunt, former ambassador to Austria. Hunt's worth was estimated around $3 billion, at one point making about $50 million a year. Through his tax-exempt Lifeline Foundation, Hunt owned over 500 radio stations and 55 television stations, promoting what many would call Nazi propaganda. Hunt provided major financial assistance to groups like the Minutemen, the John Birch Society, as well as the Nation of Islam. Hunt, like his contemporary Alfred Zoll, believed in deporting all African Americans back to Africa, which was the main reason for his financial support for the Nation of Islam and its leader Elijah Muhammad, who, according to Malcolm X, was making a very good living and had owned a number of mosques in the United States. According to an advertising executive by the name of Madeline Duncan Brown, who had claimed to have an extended love affair with President Lyndon B. Johnson, said that she was present at a party at the Dallas home of Clint Murchison Sr., another oil tycoon, on the evening prior to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This party was also attended by H.L. Hunt, J. Edgar Hoover, and Richard Nixon. According to Brown, Lyndon Johnson had a meeting with several of these men after he had told her, quote, "After tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat. That's a promise." In fact, there are numerous accounts connecting H.L. Hunt to the assassination of JFK, including the story of Eugene Hale Brading, aka Jim Braden, who was a mafia courier and had visited Hunt's office in Daley Plaza on the day of the shooting. When questioned, Braden said that he had an appointment to meet Lamar Hunt, son of H.L., and he was with Morgan H. Brown, who had left when he had been taken in for questioning. Braden had also been staying at the Cabana Motor Hotel, where Jack Ruby, who would later kill Lee Harvey Oswald, had met just the night before. 5 years later, Braden would turn up in Los Angeles, where Senator Robert Kennedy was murdered. According to Hunt's aide John Curington, Marina Oswald, who was the widow of Lee Harvey Oswald, suspected of killing JFK, had visited the Mercantile Bank building, which is where Hunt's office was located, just 2 days before the assassination. The New York Times had reported that the FBI was investigating a letter reportedly written by Lee Harvey Oswald to H.L. Hunt, asking about Oswald's position on November 8, 1963, 2 weeks before President Kennedy was assassinated. Declassified documents in 1983 revealed that the FBI apparently believed the note Oswald addressed to Mr. Hunt was intended for his son, Nelson Hunt. And according to another Hunt security man, Paul Rothermel, Jack Ruby had taken Connie Trammell to the Hunt's office for a job interview just the day before. By the mid-1970s, the Hunt brothers, as well as Hunt aide John Curington, had been indicted. Nelson Hunt and W. Herbert Hunt were on trial in federal district court for wiretapping charges related to telephone conversations of employees of the Hunt Oil Company in the fall and winter of 1969. Curington was indicted and later convicted for fraud, and it was later discovered that Hunt security man Paul Rothermel had been employed by the CIA while working for H.L. Hunt. Malcolm X vehemently denounced Hunt's funding of the Nation of Islam and also broke the news that Elijah Muhammad had been depositing donation money in offshore accounts. He also made the claim of Muhammad's extramarital affairs with the nation's secretaries, which was a serious violation of nation teachings. This claim would later be confirmed by Muhammad himself. For these reasons, along with a suspension from the Nation of Islam for incendiary comments Malcolm X had made about the assassination of JFK, Malcolm X had left the Nation of Islam and had founded his own organization of Afro-American Unity. Nearly a year after splitting from the Nation of Islam, and just days after his public mention of H.L. Hunt's funding, Malcolm X was shot in the chest at a rally at the Audubon Ballroom in the Washington Heights neighborhood of New York City. He was taken to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. The autopsy identified 21 gunshot wounds to the chest, left shoulder, arms, and legs, including 10 buckshot wounds from the initial shotgun blast. One gunman was Nation of Islam member Talmadge Hayer, also known as Thomas Haugen. Witnesses also identified the other gunmen as Nation members Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson. All three were convicted of murder in March of 1966 and sentenced to life in prison. Butler was paroled in 1985 and became the head of the Nation's Harlem Mosque in 1998. Johnson converted to Sunni Islam and was released in 1987. Both maintained their innocence. In February of 2021, 56 years later, Malcolm X's 3 daughters have asked for the murder investigation to be reopened in light of new evidence. This evidence is a letter written by Ray Wood, who was an undercover police officer at the time. Wood wrote a letter on his deathbed confessing that the New York Police Department and the FBI conspired to kill the civil rights activist. The family of Malcolm X, along with Wood's family, are being represented by civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, the same attorney who had represented the family of George Floyd. According to the Manhattan DA, the review of the matter is active and ongoing. As to who killed Malcolm X and why, it may remain to be seen. X had previous attempts on his life, including a firebombing on his home and a poisoning attempt while on a visit to Cairo. But either way, there were reasons for the Nation of Islam, as well as the intelligence agencies, to want him subdued. The FBI had launched its counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, around 1956, possibly sooner, and had placed Malcolm under surveillance. Somewhere between 1954 and 1957, a man known as John Ali joined the Nation of Islam. Ali would be the one to publicly announce X's suspension from the Nation. Ali became the National Secretary of the Nation of Islam in Chicago by 1958. He was next in power to Minister Muhammad and oversaw the financial interests of which X had been critical. According to a 2008 book titled To Kill a Black Man by Louis Lomax, an FBI memo proved that Ali was an informant. The memo was from 1964 and had been received by William C. Sullivan, Director of FBI Domestic Intel Operations. Louis Lomax, seen here interviewing Malcolm X, was the first African-American television journalist with New York's WNTA-TV. He had been working on a documentary regarding the FBI's role in the death of Malcolm X. Just a few years before, Lomax had received a letter from the FBI telling him not to print anything related to John Ali being a former FBI agent. Lomax published it anyway. In July of 1970, Lomax lost control of his rented Ford station wagon and was ejected from his car as it overturned. He was pronounced dead at the scene. John Ali would later admit in an interview that he had been interviewed by the FBI, including by the director himself, J. Edgar Hoover, but he claims he was never hired. According to an article from the now-defunct Feminist Wire, Ali is the uncle to famous hip-hop DJ Drama, co-founder of Generation Now under Atlantic Records, who initially gained recognition as the DJ for Atlanta rapper T.I.
I'm not a killer, but neither are you. But if somebody attack what you love, each one of you in here would become a killer instantaneously. Am I lying? Mother, let somebody look like they're attacking your child. Here's a woman who fought a bear because the bear snatched her baby. And she ran the bear down, screaming until the bear dropped her baby. Love casts out fear. We don't give a damn about no white man law when you attack what we love. And frankly, It ain't none of your business. What have you got to say about it? Did you teach Malcolm? Did you make Malcolm? Did you clean up Malcolm? Did you put Malcolm out before the world? Was Malcolm your traitor or was he ours? And if we dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours?
We may never know what level of involvement the Nation of Islam had in the assassination of Malcolm X, but there appears to be plenty of information showing their cooperation with agencies such as the FBI over the years. But the two groups have another connection that goes back much further than the existence of either group, one that is much darker, pervasive, and sinister.
Most of the material, most of the lessons that he got from Master Farad Muhammad, that material that he got from him, was all masonry. Just face it. All of that stuff was stone masonry.
We all agreed tonight, all of the speakers have agreed that America has a very serious problem. Not only does America have a very serious problem, but our people have a very serious problem. America's problem is self-destruction. Now, concerning the poll taken by Newsweek magazine, I think you said that this was the leaders who said that, who went with King and against Mr. Muhammad, around 90%. I just told you a little while ago, these leaders that they call leaders, this included Lena Horne, this included Dick Gregory, and this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community by the white community and have been made celebrities and usually say exactly what they know that the white man wants to hear. And it is an honor, actually, that they endorsed Dr. Martin Luther King and were against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's actually an honor.
Malcolm X was not only critical of the Nation of Islam, but of his contemporary Martin Luther King Jr., who had advocated for a more non-violent approach. The two are often compared, but it only met once on March 25, 1964, on Capitol Hill at a Senate hearing on legislation regarding segregation in public places. Martin Luther King Jr., whose real name was Michael King, became perhaps the most prominent spokesperson in the civil rights movement, leading a number of marches supporting voting rights, desegregation, and labor rights, including the Montgomery bus boycott. He was heavily promoted amongst the Christian community, becoming president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and organized the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered the famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Although King's ideals and approach were different to Malcolm X, he, like Malcolm, was a target of J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO surveillance program. King often referred to his Christian upbringing and Baptist background like his father, Martin Luther King Sr. But was King truly a Christian? And were his communist ties as extensive as the intelligence community suspected? That's what then Attorney General Robert Kennedy and the Kennedy White House wanted to know. The Reverend Billy Graham's Christianity Today said of King, "No Christian played a more prominent role in the century's most significant social justice movement." Although numerous papers published by King himself suggest that he denied the bodily resurrection of Christ, the Jesus deity, and the virgin birth. One of King's closest advisors, speechwriter and organizer of the 1963 March in Washington, was Thad Morgan Bayard Rustin, an openly gay civil rights activist and organizer for the Young Communist League. He served 28 months in prison for draft evasion and was connected to a number of Jewish organizations, including the New York Council of the American Jewish Congress. It was Rustin who introduced King to Stanley D. Levison, who would later become another advisor for Dr. King and a suspected Soviet spy. Levison was a lawyer in New York and vice president of the New York Council of the American Jewish Congress. He later raised funds, wrote speeches, and organized events for King. Leveson was also part of the defense for Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the first American civilians to be executed for conspiracy to commit espionage, and the first to suffer that penalty during peacetime for their roles in disclosing military secrets to the Soviet Union in relation to the Manhattan Project. Their surviving orphans, Michael and Robert, were adopted by Abel Mirapol, a public school English teacher and former Communist Party member, who had met the boys at a party at the home of W.E.B. Du Bois. Although it is uncertain, many suspect that Julius and Ethel are related to Susan Rosenberg, whether underground member and participant in the 1981 Brinks robbery that resulted in the deaths of 2 police officers and a guard. Susan, like Julius and Ethel, was a known communist and also born in New York City. Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King, said of Leveson's role, "Always working in the background, his contribution has been indispensable." The money being funneled to Leveson from the Soviet Union was coming from a Jew named Isidor G. Needleman, a KGB secret police agent who also fronted as an officer of Amtorg, which was the first Russian trade representative of the Soviet Union in the United States, established in New York in 1924. Amtorg negotiated contracts with major American companies such as Ford Motors, General Electric, International Harvester, DuPont, and RCA. According to Soviet intelligence, one of the 5 spy rings targeting the United States for the atomic bomb secrets was based in Amtorg in New York City. They had also negotiated an agreement with Nikola Tesla in 1935, according to unclassified FBI archives. In 1945, the International Labor Defense and the National Federation for Constitutional Liberties merged with the National Negro Congress to form the Civil Rights Congress, which was led by William L. Patterson, left-wing radical and friend of Dr. King. He was also a follower of Ben Davis, a communist councilman from Harlem. Other notable communist connections are Hunter Pitts Odell, who served as King's staff consultant and was a member of the National Committee of the Communist Party, and James Dombrowski, a close friend and advisor to King, and identified and registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act as an agent of Fidel Castro. Here you can see a check from the Southern Conference Education Fund to King, signed by Dombrowski and Benjamin Smith. Also members of the Southern Conference Education Fund were Carl and Ann Braden, journalists and communist activists out of Louisville, Kentucky. Carl was a 1972 Rhodes Scholar and preceded Barack Obama as editor of the Harvard Law Review. In 1954, the Bradens purchased a home for African-American couple Andrew and Charlotte Wade in an all-white neighborhood in the Louisville area. This angered white segregationists in the neighborhood, who threw rocks through the windows of the house, burning a cross in front of it, and firing gunshots into the home, and then later bombing the house, setting off explosives under the bedroom of the Wade's daughter. However, Carl Braden was later charged with sedition, as it was discovered that a friend of the Wades had been charged with the bombing of the house, to make it appear that it had been done by the segregationists. Braden was convicted on December 13, 1954, and sentenced to 15 years in prison, but only served 7 months of his sentence before being released on a $40,000 bond. The conviction was later overturned. The case would eventually be heard before the Supreme Court of the United States, where they ruled against Braden, saying that his conviction was constitutional. Braden served a year in prison, and his case for clemency was led by Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was also involved with the Highlander Folk School, which operated out of Monteagle, Tennessee, seen pictured as number 1. Number 2 is Abner Berry, member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party and writer for the Daily Worker. Number 3 is Aubrey Williams, Communist Party agent and president of the Southern Conference Educational Fund. Number 4 was head of the Highlander Folk School, Miles Horton. The Highlander Folk School was financed by the Julius Rosenwald Fund, who at one time was head of the Sears Roebuck Company. Sitting on the board of Sears at the time with Rosenwald was Gaylord Freeman and John Drick, both Grand Masters of the Priory of Sion at First National Bank of Chicago, as well as Thomas G. Ayers, father of Weatherman Underground founder Bill Ayers. The Rosenwald Foundation funded a number of schools throughout the United States, especially education for African Americans, and provided funding through Dr. Booker T. Washington, a known Freemason, at the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. They also financed communist front groups and the NAACP. Civil rights activist Rosa Parks, a member of the Eastern Star, attended this school just months before her famous incident where she refused to give up her seat on the city bus. Another major organization funded by the Rosenwald Fund was the American Social Hygiene Association, of whose leaders were often proponents of eugenics and Darwinism. Julius Rosenwald himself served as honorary vice president. The leader of the Connecticut chapter of the social hygiene movement was Dr. Thomas Hepburn. His wife was Catherine Martha Houghton Hepburn, mother of famed Hollywood actress Katharine Hepburn. Hepburn co-founded the Birth Control League, along with Margaret Sanger. This organization would later become known as Planned Parenthood. Strangely enough, Julius Rosenwald, like Julius Rosenberg, played a role in early covert atomic weapons development in the 20s and 30s, providing $7 million for the development of the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Rosenwald was a member of the Chicago Sinai Congregation of B'nai B'rith, a Jewish Masonic organization. His rabbi and mentor was Emil Hirsch. Hirsch was the man who had encouraged Rosenwald to spend much of his wealth supporting black schools. Rosenwald was also a major funder of the president of the Atlanta B'nai B'rith organization, Leo Frank, owner of the Forsyth and Bell Pencil lead plant. These were grueling sweatshops that often employed Gentile, poverty-stricken preteen and teenage girls and boys, who had described Frank as a violent serial child molester. In 1913, Leo Frank was convicted of raping and murdering Mary Fagan, an employee at the Bell Pencil lead factory. Rosenwald had used his influence to attempt to free Leo Frank, to no avail. After a lengthy court battle, Frank eventually had his sentence commuted, but in August of 1915, an angry mob took matters into their own hands and lynched Frank at Fry's Gin in Cobb County, Marietta, Georgia. It was the conviction of Leo Frank which had inspired B'nai B'rith's formation of the Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish espionage and spy agency, working under the guise as a civil rights organization. Julius Rosenwald's daughter, Edith Rosenwald, married cotton merchant Edgar Bloom Stern of New Orleans. The two founded radio station WDSU, which gave airtime to suspected JFK murderer and known Marxist Lee Harvey Oswald. The two were also partners in NUMEC, Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation, which operated out of Pennsylvania. This company was later charged with smuggling radioactive fuels to Israel and conducting fallout studies on their own employees, essentially using them as lab rats. Edith Rosenwald Stern was a close friend of Clay Shaw, who was also put on trial for the assassination of JFK. According to Michael Collins Piper, author of Final Judgment, Israel achieved its nuclear weapons capabilities precisely because of the assassination of President Kennedy. Yet another communist associated with Martin Luther King Jr. was Robert Williams from North Carolina, where he was head of the NAACP Union County chapter. Williams had been accused of kidnapping. He and his wife fled to Cuba, where he authored the book Negroes with Guns, detailing his civil rights struggle. The foreword was written by none other than King himself. Williams would make numerous broadcasts on his pirate radio show, Radio Free Dixie. After a falling out with Castro, Williams moved to China at the invitation of Chairman Mao himself. Only 20 days prior to the 1963 March on Washington, Williams convinced Mao to speak out on King's movement. Finally, in 1969, Williams and his wife were offered amnesty in exchange for information on what was going on inside China. Williams eventually died in 1996. His eulogy was given by Rosa Parks. On April 4, 1968, at 6:01 p.m., Martin Luther King Jr. was fatally shot at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, just days after delivering his famous "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech at the Mason Temple. Police later arrested James Earl Ray, who had been fleeing from a rooming house across the street from the motel. But the details of King's death have largely been in dispute, with many believing that, like Malcolm X's death, the intelligence community was largely responsible. Ray confessed to the assassination on March 10, 1969. He was sentenced to a 99-year prison term, but he recanted his confession just 3 days later. After escaping from Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Petros, Tennessee in June of 1977, Ray was recaptured and eventually died in prison on April 23, 1998, at the age of 70. Till his death, Ray claimed that there was a conspiracy by elements of the government against Martin Luther King Jr. Both King and Malcolm X were dead at 39 years old. Judge Joe Brown, who presided over the final appeal of James Earl Ray, had this to say in 2013.
Dr. King was murdered with a professional team, two-man team with an offset spotter, and an on-the-site spotter. Ray and about 4 or 5 others were opportunistic scapegoats. There were handlers who were designed and trained to be invisible with preposterous names so they would be looked at as non-existent. And we have some very grave problems with what went on in this case in terms of what we've done to look at it. Everybody thinks a sniper would be hanging out of a window. A shooter maybe, but not a sniper. You're not supposed to see him. Questions that may be asked. If Dr. King did not come out of the backside of the Lorraine Motel, why would the sniper be waiting for him at the backside of the Lorraine Motel? If we have a situation where you have a bullet that you can analyze and you don't, and then 30-some years later it turns out the bullet does not come out of the gun that you say is raised, you've got some questions.
Despite the numerous links connecting communist infiltrators and Martin Luther King Jr., the general sentiment is that the government did indeed play a role in his death. Adding to the narrative are the mysterious deaths of King's brother, A.D. King, who was found dead at the bottom of his pool just 15 months after his brother's assassination. Although the cause of his death was listed as an accidental drowning, no water was found in A.D.'s lungs. He had bruises on his head, rings around his neck, and was discovered in his underwear. In June of 1974, King's mother Alberta was shot and killed by Marcus Wayne Chanel, a self-proclaimed black Hebrew Israelite. His original intent was to shoot Martin Luther King Sr., but decided at the last moment to kill Alberta because she was closer. Also killed were Deacon Edward Boykin and Mrs. Jimmy Mitchell, a retired school teacher. The attack took place less than 100 yards from where Dr. King had been killed. Some of the FBI files regarding King and allegations of extramarital affairs, sexual deviancy, and even an incident which claims Dr. King watched on as a pastor friend raped a woman are under court seal until 2027. But just as there appears to be a government conspiracy involving King's death, there's equally compelling evidence that there were infiltrators in King's own camp. Reverend Samuel Billy Kyles, who was with Dr. King on the day of his assassination, made a peculiar statement at a news conference in 1998.
But that gave me the wonderful privilege of spending the last hour on earth. 3 preachers in a room, Abernathy, King, and Kyles. And we spent that last hour together in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel. The press is always curious, and writers, what went on? What did you talk about? I said, we just talk preacher talk. What preachers talk about when they get together.
Y'all pay
revivals and all
what
that.
you're fixing to hear now.
About 5:45, we walked on the balcony, and he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away, so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out. Thank you. I turned around and then knocked him back on the balcony. Only as I moved away, so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out. Thank you. I turned around and then knocked him back on the balcony.
Kyles went on to become a regional organizer for Jesse Jackson's 1984 and 1988 presidential campaigns. He also served on President Clinton's Advisory Committee on Religious Freedom Abroad. He died on April 26, 2016, and his funeral was held at the Mason Temple in South Memphis, the same location as King's famous "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech. The Mason Temple is named for Bishop Charles Harrison Mason, founder of the Church of God in Christ, who is entombed in a marble crypt inside the temple. Bishop Mason was a root worker, otherwise known as a hoodoo man. Hoodoo being a set of spiritual practices, traditions, and beliefs created by African slaves in North America, otherwise known as Low Country Voodoo. Many hoodoo artifacts create a crossroads, representing the idea that its user has the personal power of taking active control over their own lives, such as healing disease, finding a suitable mate, or warding off evil. Depicted in such tales as the stories of Tommy and Robert Johnson, and the black man that they encounter, often described as a devil, could be a reference to Papa Legba, who is of Haitian legend, otherwise known as the Great Elocutioner, often associated with dogs, which may explain why their tales refer to the hounds of hell, which accompany the black man. It's unknown whether or not Bishop Charles Harrison Mason was a Freemason himself, but the black and white Masonic floorboard at the base of his original tomb suggests a high likelihood. But the Reverend Kyles was not the only one in Martin Luther King Jr.'s camp to have sold him out. In 2010, it was revealed that African-American photojournalist Ernest Withers had been recruited and paid by the FBI's COINTELPRO program to provide information on the American civil rights movement for nearly 2 decades. Withers had also photographed much of Sam Cooke's career, the murder trial of Emmett Till, and was an official photographer for Stax Records for 20 years. But once again, a common theme resurfaces, with the deaths of popular civil rights leaders, musicians, and people of influence. The deep entrenchment of Freemasonry, Greek life, and the gatekeepers of the Black Boule.
It's you liberals who have lifted them up, Howard.
Paul, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard, you liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, political jobs.
Paul, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
No, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has any. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. No, thank you. In fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.
I am DeMarco Morgan, a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
My name is Chesley McNeil.
My name is Samuel Crenshaw.
The name of my fraternity is the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
And we do like this.
I do!
I'm Donna Lowry with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
So we decided on that day that we would go no other way. We cracked Destination, aka Destination, aka.
I am Blaine Alexander. I'm one of the reporters at 11 Alive, and I am also a dynamic diva, a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Ladies and gentlemen, to make the history of the great conspiracy both clear and convincing, we need 100 volumes of 1,000 pages each. And we hope that those scholarly volumes will all be written in due course as a guide and a warning to future generations. But at present we have a more immediate and more urgent task. We want to give you simply an outline of the progress of this organized evil force from its beginning up to the present time. The aim of the conspirators always has been and still is to impose the brutal tyranny of their rule over the whole human race. Step one, we must hunt the first steps largely in the shadows rather than in the substance of history. For the conspiracy is deep-rooted. 200 years ago, or during the last half of the 18th century, there were in Europe many secret societies with grandiose dreams of overthrowing all existing human institutions and of rising out of the resulting chaos as the all-powerful rulers of a new order of civilization. Of these groups, the Illuminati, founded in Bavaria by Adam Weishaupt on May 1, 1776, was undoubtedly the most important.
March 6, 1775. Prince Hall and 15 other black men are initiated into Lodge number 441 of the Masonic Grand Lodge of Ireland. The lodge was attached to British forces stationed in Boston, Massachusetts. Prince Hall was born somewhere between 1735 and 1738. His original birthplace and parents are unknown. Hall mentions in his writing that New England was his homeland, but many suspect that he was from Barbados. Historian Charles Harris Wesley theorizes that Prince Hall was enslaved by the age of 11 to a leather tanner from Boston named William Hall and was freed by the year 1770. It's uncertain if Hall served in the American Colonial Army at the time of the Revolutionary War, as 6 men by the name of Prince Hall were registered at the time. But in April of 1777, he created 5 leather drumheads for an artillery regiment in Boston. Brother Prince Hall had shown an interest in joining the Masonic fraternity. He, along with 14 other free black men, petitioned for admittance to the all-white Boston St. John's Lodge. All 15 were rejected. Although these were free men, black men were still unable to join Masonic lodges or take part in Masonic processions on St. John's Day. But by September 29, 1784, the Grand Master of the Mother Grand Lodge of England, the Duke of Cumberland, issued a charter for the African Lodge No. 1, later renamed African Lodge No. 459. This would become the first African Masonic Lodge. Hall was made a provincial Grand Master on January 27, 1791. 6 years later, in 1797, Prince Hall organized the lodge in Philadelphia, African Lodge No. 459. After his death in 1807, the African Grand Lodge declared its independence from the United Grand Lodge of England and all other lodges in 1827, and by 1847, they renamed it the Prince Hall Grand Lodge. Prince Hall is considered the father of African Freemasonry, with numerous lodges around the world and whose members come from all walks of life, including politicians, athletes, entertainers, and men of influence. Hall had begun a school for children out of his own home, focusing on liberal arts, a theme that would last for years to come. He was also involved in the Back to Africa movement, petitioning for emigration to the Massachusetts Senate, to no avail. By the 20th century, this movement would be spearheaded by Jamaican activist and black nationalist Marcus Garvey, also a Prince Hall Freemason. He had been inspired by Martin R. Delany, abolitionist, writer, journalist, philosopher, and inventor. Delany was one of the first 3 blacks admitted to Harvard Medical School and the first black field officer in the U.S. Army. In 1853, Delany wrote a short book entitled The Origin and Objects of Ancient Freemasonry, its introduction into the United States and legitimacy among colored men, which posits theories for Freemasonry's Ethiopian origins. In 1859, Delany traveled to Liberia in hopes of looking for a settlement. By 1877, he co-created the Liberia Exodus Joint Stock Steamship Company. Delany would retire a few years later in 1880 to concentrate on supporting his family. This is when Marcus Garvey would become more active in the migration movement to Liberia under his Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. At the time, Liberia was planning to lease the land and its rubber tree plantations to the UNIA for $1 per acre. Garvey had said at the time, quote, "If the oil of Africa is good for Rockefeller's interest, iron is good for Carnegie Trust, the Oppenheimers raping and stripping Africa of her natural resources of gold, silver, diamonds, then these minerals are good for us. Why should we allow Wall Street and the capitalist group of America and other countries to exploit our country when they refuse to give us a fair chance in the countries of our adoption? Why should not Africa give to the world its black Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Henry Ford?" But this deal would eventually fall through when the Liberian government made a different deal with the Firestone Rubber Company, a deal that would lead to numerous instances of brutal violence throughout Liberia, lasting well into the late 1990s. Delany, Garvey, Garvey's successor to the UNIA, James R. Stewart, as well as Liberian president and later Supreme Commissioner of the UNIA, and his successor, William Tolbert, were all Prince Hall Freemasons. William Tolbert eventually becoming Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Liberia. Marcus Garvey's influence had not only grown in Liberia, Ethiopia, and his home country of Jamaica, but the United States as well. By 1918, he was reaching over 1 million plus diasporic Africans without television or radio by way of his newspaper, The Negro World. Garvey, like his mentor Delaney, had gathered inspiration for the Back to Africa movement from Henry McNeil Turner, a bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He had taught that God was black, an idea that Garvey would later adopt along with ideas of Moorish science, which is part of the reason for the Prince Hall's wearing of the Moorish fez, seen worn by Masonic Shriners. Out of Garvey's influence came the religious movement known as Rastafarianism, which teaches that Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie is God and Garvey his prophet, similar to how the Nation of Islam lays claim to Noble Drew Ali. Like the Moors, the Rasta drew influence from Caribbean folklore, Western esotericism, the Rosicrucian Order, and Jewish Freemasonry. Rastafarianism was officially founded by communist and Prince Hall Freemason Leonard James Percival. Bishop Turner was also a Prince Hall Freemason, joining between 1862 and 1863 in Washington, D.C. This decision was not well received within the Methodist Church, despite the fact that the church's founder, Richard Allen, was also a Prince Hall Mason and had established the Free Africa Society, along with Absalom Jones. Jones had been treasurer under African Lodge No. 1 of Philadelphia, under Prince Hall. Eventually, the UNIA, who had been working alongside Prince Hall lodges, and the African Blood Brotherhood for African Liberation and Redemption, had a falling out over how radical the movement should be. And in the 1920s, many of its members merged into the Workers' Party of America, which is the legal name for the Communist Party in the United States. Another group that was growing around the same time as an alternative to the UNIA was the Canaanite Temple, which was founded in 1913, 1 year before the UNIA. It was based in Newark, New Jersey, but later moved to Chicago in 1926, where it was renamed the Moorish Science Temple of America, and was founded by Timothy Drew from North Carolina, who was also known as Noble Drew Ali. Drew claimed to have received a lost section of the Holy Quran from an Egyptian high priest who had trained him in the mystical practices of reincarnation. Ali's ideals drew inspiration from Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, Gnosticism, and Freemasonry. Many of these practices draw similarities to the Mormon teachings and their relationship with Joseph Smith and Freemasonry. In 1893, a group of Muslim dignitaries visited the Chicago World's Fair, where it was believed that the ancient Egyptian Arabic Order of Nobles of the Shrine and its sister affiliate, the Daughters of Isis, was founded, otherwise known as the Black Shriners. There are photographs that exist of Noble Drew Ali in Egyptian Shriner gear, although it is unknown if he is actually a Shriner. Although it's uncertain, it's quite possible that the Egyptian man who had influenced Ali was Abdul Hamid Suleiman, who had claimed to have incorporated the lodge of Mecca Medina Temple of ancient free and operative Masons, which at one point had 96 degrees and is one of the rites of Egyptian Masonry. Suleiman claimed to have been from Khartoum, which is now in the Republic of Sudan. Men such as Suleiman were known as Mohammedan scientists, and their ideas were later incorporated into groups like the Nation of Islam, Christian Science, Moorish Science, and Scientology, as well as various UFO cults. This is possibly one of the origins where many hip-hop artists have coined the phrase, dropping science. Suleiman's true origins are unknown, but he was listed as an officer and past master of the Atma Lodge AF and OM, which is connected to the Mecca chapter OES. By 1929, a young Wallace Fard Muhammad joined the Moorish Science Temple, and after a brief battle for control of the finances of the MSTA, left Chicago for Detroit, and on the 4th of July 1930 founded his own group known as the Nation of Islam. Emperor Haile Selassie was not especially popular in Ethiopia, but he was popular amongst Western elites, in particular Jewish bankers, and those who supported President Woodrow Wilson's plans for a one-world government under the League of Nations. It's unknown if Woodrow Wilson was a Mason himself, although his mentor, Colonel Edward Mandell House, was a major founder of the earlier American Institute of International Affairs, which is now known as the Council of Foreign Relations, and helped sign the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, 13 being a popular Masonic number. Founder of Rastafarianism, Leonard Percival Howell, had helped finance the British elite's shadow government in Jamaica with a large marijuana plantation, where he employed nearly 4,500 people, Leonard's partner, Mortimer Plano, was a gangster who was spreading Leonard's teaching amongst the Rasta movement. He was also manager and spiritual advisor to singer Bob Marley. It was said of Mortimer that he was using Rastafarianism as a tool to spread international socialism. The early inspiration for Rastafarianism, Marcus Garvey, had struggled with opposition from an unlikely opponent, that of which is now often referred to as the Black Boule. More specifically, the founding member of the New York City chapter, W.E.B. Du Bois, also a Prince Hall Freemason. Du Bois had stated that one of the Boule's major ambitions was to steal the black professional from the ranks of Marcus Garvey. The Boule is a black Greek society, based on another society founded at Yale University, known as Skull and Bones, whose members have included some of the most powerful men in the world, such as William Howard Taft, Prescott Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, William F. Buckley Jr., John Kerry, and George W. Bush. Like Skull and Bones, the Boule is a highly secretive organization whose members are usually operating for personal gain, under the guise of public service and philanthropy. The term Boule, or advisors to the king, represented the lower house of parliament, charged with arranging affairs for the king, suggesting a higher order that is truly in charge. This is likely represented by white groups such as the Rockefeller Foundation, Rothschilds, and Cecil Rhodes' British South Africa Company, which dominated much of the wealth in Africa. Cecil Rhodes himself was a member of Masonic Oxford Lodge No. 357. The Boule was first formed in Philadelphia by Dr. Henry Minton and 5 of his colleagues, an acronym for Sigma Pi Phi, the first African-American Greek secret society. This would later grow into 4 fraternities: Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Phi Beta Sigma, and the female sororities known as the Order of the Eastern Stars, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, and Sigma Gamma Rho. Years later, in 1996, Iota Theta Phi would be added, and the group would collectively be referred to as the Divine Nine. This Greek system continues to serve as a recruitment mechanism for Masonic secret societies to this day. Nearly 70 to 75% of all black male lawyers are members of the secret society, Sigma Pi Phi. In fact, many of America's successful black elite, like their white counterparts, has either a Greek or Masonic connection.
I'm sorry, we Omegas. Yeah, I was trying not to do that on the Praise the Lord. I'm sorry, we Omegas. Yeah, I was trying not to do that on the Praise the Lord.
For more than a century, Alpha Kappa Alpha women have been at the forefront of every major social, civic, and humanitarian movement in this nation.
7 young men founded a brotherhood committed to the cause of freedom. Today, over 125,000 members strong, the Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha continue this fight. W.E.B. Du Bois, Jesse Owens, Duke Ellington, Edward Brooke, Thurgood Marshall, Andrew Young, and Martin Luther King Jr. are among the countless alpha men who have dedicated their lives to scholarship, manly deeds, and love for all mankind.
Mr. Roland Martin, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Great. I see you're here at Howard, the Mecca, rocking your Alpha Phi Alpha
That's
apparel.
Right. I'm here. The president invited me out, so I'm glad to hang out with him and see lots of friends out here, so having a good time.
Absolutely. I overheard you talking a little trash. What makes Alpha the #1 fraternity?
Easy. We were the first, and we are the first black collegiate Greek letter organization. Everybody come after us. They're number imitators. And so, as I tell them, Alpha's all y'all daddy.
This living legend never forgets his Sigma roots. and returns at every opportunity to embrace the brotherhood at conventions and conferences.
So when you talking about you gonna set yourself up like tenants of Skull and Bones at Yale, you better believe somebody in around this Boule, and we checking on this history of Minton, may have been a Skull and Bones at Yale his damn self.
Right. Pass. Passing for what?
Passing for what? In the building of the organization plan, reliance was placed upon Greek history and tradition. See, a nigga tell you. Say, ask them niggas in that. I say, now look, hey, in the fraternity and sorority thing, hey, y'all really Greek or y'all like African on the slide? They say, no, brother, it's really African. Organizational plan, reliance was placed on Greek history. So when you confront them, they gonna swear it ain't a Greek thing. And you gonna tell them, say, well, I seen your thing, and I know your thing is Greek from the jump. And no subordinate Boule, Archon, can ever deviate from the structure and the guidelines laid down by people in the organization higher than them. So when you're in a hierarchy, you are controlled from the top down. The bottom could be honest people, but they must do what the top tell them. That's the deal. Acquaintance with Western civilization. Although Greek culture had relations with the culture of the Orient, hold it now. Seemed like they skipped over somebody. Let me go back. You see, this might not just be an affirmation of Greek, but this is a denial of Africa.
No justice! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
As organizers of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, the National Action Network assembled more than 250,000 in Washington, D.C. to call on Congress to work towards the fulfillment of Dr. King's dream for jobs and justice.
Second down and 10. They fake it to Hyde, throw it to Hyde, and Hyde will find the end zone.
A player who's been out of the NFL will have his closest encounter with the league since he caused a storm of controversy 3 years ago.
Colin Kaepernick is finally getting the shot he's been waiting for, a chance to make an NFL roster.
Former San Francisco 49ers quarterback polarized the public in 2016 when he began protesting police brutality and injustice by not standing for the national anthem.
Colin Kaepernick is an American football player from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was adopted at 5 weeks old to Rick and Teresa Kaepernick, a white couple. He was selected by the San Francisco 49ers in the second round of the NFL draft and led their team to the first Super Bowl appearance since 1994. Over the next few seasons, Kaepernick would lose and win back his starting job. In the third preseason game of the 2016 season, Kaepernick sat during the playing of the U.S. national anthem, citing his protesting of racial injustice and police brutality, a polarizing move hotly debated throughout the country. By 2017, Kaepernick found himself out of the league and filed a grievance with the NFL, accusing them of colluding to keep him from working. This protest gained new attention in 2020 amid the protests of police brutality during the George Floyd situation, when Officer Derek Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck. Currently, Kaepernick is celebrated as a human rights activist, receiving awards from the ACLU, Harvard University, and Sports Illustrated. He also signed lucrative deals with Nike and has a Netflix documentary produced by Ava DuVernay, a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Ironically, the deal between Kaepernick and Nike was brokered by lawyer Mark Garagos, who was named as a co-conspirator in a case against lawyer Michael Avenatti, which accused Avenatti of extortion against Nike. He's also represented Michael Jackson in his child molestation case, as well as Jussie Smollett and Claire Bronfman in the Nexium human trafficking scandal. For all the media hype surrounding the so-called discrimination against Kaepernick, Colin seemed to be profiting off the Take a Knee movement, and had turned down other leagues to play football because they could not afford his $20 million price tag. In addition to that, Kaepernick received an opportunity to showcase his skills at a special scheduled workout in which 25 NFL team representatives would be attending, a privilege unheard of for any other player in the NFL. Just 30 minutes before the workout, Kaepernick canceled and moved the event to a high school over an hour away. He then chastised the league for not being willing to work with him. Also ironic was the correlation of Kaepernick's taking a knee with the George Floyd protests, which caused police officers, athletes, and politicians to start a campaign of taking a knee, including an odd event showing members of Congress kneeling with kente scarves around their necks. Was this simply a coincidence, or was there something more symbolic in play? It's important to note that Colin Kaepernick was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and the kneeling may suggest something much deeper. In third-degree Freemasonry, members are educated in a tale of Hiram Abiff, a central character and allegory to candidates of the third degree. He is presented as a chief architect of King Solomon's temple. After failing to provide passwords, he is murdered by 3 ruffians who hide his body. Solomon then sends out a search party, and upon finding his body, the 3 ruffians are brought to justice. There are various ways to tell the tale, according to the lodge. What follows is an excerpt from a third-degree ritual. Most worshipful King Solomon, we come to inform you that 15 of us fellow crafts, seeing the temple about to be completed, and being desirous of obtaining the secrets of a master mason, by which we might travel in foreign countries and receive master's wages, entered into a horrid conspiracy to extort them from our Grand Master, Hiram Abiff, or take his life. But reflecting with horror on the atrocity of the crime, 12 of us recanted, but the other 3 persisted in their murderous design, and we fear that they have taken the Grand Master's life. We therefore now appear before your Majesty, clothed with white gloves and aprons in token of our innocence, and acknowledging our premeditated guilt, we humbly implore your pardon. There is a similar tale of Osiris of ancient Egypt, who represents the sun. In the legend, Osiris is killed by his brother Set. This is where the term sun Set originates from. Osiris then travels into the underworld, is resurrected by Isis, and conceives Horus. It is a metaphor for the killing of the sun in the northern hemisphere at the autumn equinox. Here you can see the ancient Egyptian god of death, Anubis, kneeling with his fist raised in the air, saluting the rising sun each dawn, similar to the protests we saw around the world, in particular amongst police officers, who are often members of a Masonic or fraternal order. In the tale of Hiram Abiff, he is attacked at the east gate of the temple by Jubilah, at the south gate by Jubilah, and at the west gate by Jubiloom, who succeeds in killing Hiram, but not in extracting the password. The west gate is symbolic of the west where the sun sets. Some of this symbolism was on display on September 21, 2013 in Nairobi, Kenya, when the Westgate Mall was attacked by 4 masked gunmen representing the Islamic terrorist group Al-Shabaab, whose factions have sometimes been at war and other times have pledged allegiance to the Islamic terrorist group ISIS. It's important to note that the attack happened at noon on the autumn equinox at the West Gate, and that Nairobi is approximately 89 miles to the equator.
All right, 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick is staying true to his word on the national anthem. Last night, he again refused to stand for the anthem before a preseason game in San Diego.
What are you going to do against it? I think those are very valid points, and Kaepernick has to play extremely well in order for San Francisco to win.
You know, he's played lousy.
It's been awful. Yeah. But, you know, he's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi.
Yeah.
Stand by. Right. I'm just saying.
You get the pass with you.
All right.
The international headquarters for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is here in Chicago. During this pandemic, Saturday's board meeting was virtual, and in the middle of the meeting, there was an abrupt interruption.
People were crying, shouting, praising God for the opportunity and for her accomplishment.
Members learned one of their own was officially named Vice President-elect. Kamala Harris pledged at AKA's founding chapter at Howard University.
We had to take a break because people were just so elated and emotional about it. It's a proud moment for us. And we know that she is going to do what she can on behalf of all Americans.
My reaction was just so celebratory, full of joy, full of celebration, but also being able to understand I'm really living through her story, history.
Takira Du Bois pledged at U of I and is now a grad student at Howard University. Du Bois, a first-generation college graduate, says she is seeing herself in the election of Vice President-elect Harris.
The rise of Kamala Harris is as mysterious as the organizations she associates with. Harris is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, part of the Divine Nine. This sorority represents the goddess Katesh, a Semitic goddess of Syrian or Sumerian origin, who was assimilated into the Egyptian pantheon during the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom. She is the goddess of nature, sacred ecstasy, and sexual pleasure. In their Greek nature, they are the sacred whores and prostitutes that protect the monarchy and the kingdom. The women of the rings of Katesh were commanded to seduce dissenters looking to overthrow Cleopatra's throne. After Cleopatra's death, the ring expanded to Greece and Rome, and were reported to have protected men such as Alexander the Great and Michelangelo. Coincidentally, Kamala Harris started out as a maiden of powerful San Francisco politician Willie Brown, a member of the San Francisco NAACP and Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Brown authored and lobbied the Consenting Adult Sex Bill, which legalized homosexuality in California in 1975, and from that year to 1978 supported the People's Temple, led by Jim Jones. The People's Temple was a religious organization that combined elements of Christianity with communist ideology, best known for the events of November 18, 1978, in Guyana, when 909 people died in mass suicide. Brown attended the temple at least a dozen times, and at one point introduced Jones as a combination of Martin King, Angela Davis, Albert Einstein, and Chairman Mao. Jones was indeed a communist who had become frustrated, especially during the trial of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Here he is seen receiving the Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award from Pastor Cecil Williams in 1977. Willie Brown is also a Prince Hall Freemason. Hall's relationship with Kamala Harris goes back to the 1990s, while he was still married, but separated from his wife Blanche, who shared a home with him on the aptly named Masonic Street. Brown was 60, Harris 29. Brown would finesse the young Alameda County prosecutor into not one, but two well-paying appointments, the California Medical Assistance Commission and the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. The pair split when Brown was inaugurated as San Francisco mayor. Harris would continue to receive support from Brown, leading to her election as San Francisco District Attorney in 2004. By then, Brown was facing an FBI corruption investigation for handing out lucrative city contracts and appointments. By this time, Harris was dating talk show host Montel Williams. In 2015, then AG Harris was found to be running a clandestine Masonic Fraternal Order of Police that claimed to be descendants of the Roman Catholic Knights Templar, which led to 3 arrests: David Henry, otherwise known as Henry X, Tonette Hayes, and Brandon Keel. Keel was discovered to be on Harris's payroll, and making matters even more peculiar, had proper state business permits, licenses, and state private security guard permits. Just hours after charges were dropped against Brandon Keel, David Inc. Henry died of a pulmonary embolism.
I understand that, what are you doing?
I'm giving a blessing to the audience.
I don't think they appreciate it. They were throwing it back.
Well, they thought it was a curse. Would you like me to show them how the sign of the curse works?
Sign of the curse?
Completely different.
How does it go?
No, not at you people out there in the audience, but this is the difference.
Aim it toward Red China, would you?
This is the sign of the horn. A curse sign, the 2 fingers extended. This way, spread apart for sort of shotgun blast, you know.
I always
all over.
figured if I ever met the
devil,
it'd have dirty fingernails. Go on.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
Where?
Dirty fingernails.
Well, that's because I've been fooling around with your equipment.
Never mind. Don't blame it on the studio. Go on with it.
All right.
So that's the sign of the horn, and then what happens? Is that it?
Well, there are other ones, too.
Yeah, what are the other ones?
The other ones, one of them's the pox sign. That's 3 fingers extended.
Pox on you?
A pox on you. During the Middle Ages, this was used. But
You're
originally...
a bad cat.
Well, you have to be bad to be good.
My next guest was used also in worshiping the devil, participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations. She is currently in extensive therapy, suffers from multiple personality disorder, meaning she's blocked out many of the terrifying and painful memories of her childhood. Meet Rachel, who is also in disguise to protect her identity. You come from generations of ritualistic abuse?
Yes, my family has an extensive family tree, and they keep track of who's been involved and who hasn't been involved. And it's gone back to, like, 1700.
And so you were...
Right, I was born into a family that believes in this.
And does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl?
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
Really? And so who knows about it? Lots of people now.
I talked to a police detective in the Chicago area, and several of my friends know, and I've spoke publicly before. And
so when you were brought up in this kind of evilness, did you just think it was normal?
I've blocked out a lot of the memories I had because of my multiple personality disorder. But yes, I mean, it's like if you grow up with something, you think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought.
So what kinds of things? You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to, you know...
Whose babies?
There were people who bred babies in their family. No one would know about it. A lot of people were overweight, so you couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not. Or they would supposedly go away for a while and then come back. The other thing I want to point out, not all Jewish people sacrifice babies. I mean,
no,
it's not a very
typical thing.
I just want to point that out.
This is the first time I heard of any Jewish people sacrificing babies. But anyway, so you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Uh-huh. Power. And so, were you ever used? Were you ever used yourself?
I was molested. I was raped several times.
Mm-hmm. And what's your mother doing?
She's
in all of this. What's her role in all of this?
I'm not exactly what her role is. I haven't, recovered all of my memories, but her family was extremely involved. Mm-hmm. She brought me to it. Mm-hmm. Both of my parents brought me to it.
And where is she now?
She lives in the Chicago metropolitan area. She's on the Human Relations Commission of the town that she lives in, and she's an upstanding citizen. Nobody would suspect her.
Were you raised with a sense of right and wrong, Rachel?
Yes. I mean, it's like I had both. I mean, to the outside world, everything we did was proper and right, and then there were the nights that things changed, that things just got turned around. What was wrong was right, and what was right was wrong. What was wrong was right, and what was right was wrong. And what was right was wrong. Was wrong. Was wrong. Was wrong. Was wrong.
In order to understand the nature of some of these secret societies, it's important to include part of the history of the oldest monotheistic religion in the world. Traditional Orthodox Judaism includes the belief that the exile, which occurred around 69 AD, was a decree from God, which would scatter them amongst the nations. It would be God's decree alone that would allow them to return. God's promise also included their protection while living amongst other nations. The common belief amongst non-Zionist Jews is that any attempts to force or hurry this process would be an act of rebellion, and their efforts would be thwarted. According to Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, many Orthodox Jews who were faithful to the Torah did not support the Zionist movement, as forcing the resettlement of Jews to Israel would ultimately incite God's wrath. In researcher B.R. Taylor's documentary, The Satanization of Judaism, Taylor explains the origins of the Ashkenazi faith.
During the 8th century, King Boule of the Kazerian Empire had a dilemma. He was surrounded by expanding empires on all sides, Christians to the west and north, and Muslims to the south. He concluded that if his people converted to Christianity, they would be targeted by the Muslims from the south. Conversely, if they converted to Islam, he would be attacked by the Christians from the north and west. Eager to stay in power and continue being a significant trading hub, he decided the best option would be to convert en masse to Judaism. This would allow the king to stay relatively neutral while keeping his kingdom and trading options open. These Jews became known as Ashkenazi Jews and seen as a different subrace to the Semitic Jews of Canaan within the Middle East. Over the centuries, as the Kazerian Empire crumbled, many Ashkenazi Jews moved west to Eastern Europe, to places like the Ukraine, Poland, and parts of Russia. Although the Ashkenazi Jews had accepted the faith of Judaism and practiced its rituals and ceremonies, they were considered by many Semitic Jews as second-rate and not part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Because of this, throughout most of history, the Semitic Jews would not allow intermarriage between the two groups. However, over the past 150 years, this has become more accepted. The main difference between the Ashkenazi and Semitic Jews, apart from biological lineage, was their attitude towards the Judaic faith. According to the scholar of Jewish history, Mohammed Rafiq, the Semitic Jews centered their faith around the Torah, the Old Testament, using the Talmud as a side commentary, whereas the Ashkenazi Jews centered their faith around the Talmud and Zohar, mystical teachings known as Kabbalah, while pushing the Torah to one side. This created two very different ideologies, especially concerning the Messiah and a return to the land of Israel. While the Semitic Jews had no desire to relocate themselves back to the promised land, without God, giving them a signal to do so with the arrival of a new Messiah. The Ashkenazi Jews were happy to initiate the return to Israel before the Messiah appeared, believing that a return to Israel would promote his appearance in the process.
In the mid-1500s, a young Egyptian known as Isaac ben Solomon Luria, or Ari the Lion, was creating a new version of Kabbalism, which would become known as the Lurianic school of Kabbalism. This would become a staple of the Judaic Zohar, and would reshape many rituals and approaches towards mystical Judaism. By 1626, the birth of Sabbatai Zevi in Smyrna, eastern Turkey, would take the Lurianic Kabbalism to a new level. Zevi became an ordained rabbi whose influence would spread throughout the Ottoman Empire. By 1648, Sabbatai would declare himself the Messiah to his followers. This would lead to his expulsion from Smyrna a few years later, due to his extraordinary claims. From there, he would travel to Constantinople, where he would meet alchemist Abraham Yakini, who was alleged to have forged a manuscript in archaic characters bearing witness to Zevi's messianic claims. From there, Zevi would spend time in Salonika and later Cairo, where he encountered a wealthy Jewish tax manager, Raphael Joseph, who helped finance Zevi. From there, Zevi traveled to Jerusalem and later, during a trip to Gaza, met Nathan Benjamin Levy, who would eventually assist Zevi. At this point, Zevi had garnered quite a bit of attention and prestige within the community and was eventually threatened with excommunication from the rabbis and asked to leave Jerusalem. Frustrated, Zevi left for Smyrna, but would later return to Gaza and then back to Smyrna, where he would reveal himself publicly as the Messiah, to great fanfare, as many were expecting such a revelation by the upcoming year of 1666, an important period for the Messianic movement. The Sabbatean movement would explode at this time, reaching around 1 million followers. Sabbatai made his return to Constantinople, where he thought he would be met with praise, but was instead arrested upon arrival. But Zevi's followers would report a different story back home, saying that he was being celebrated. The Sultan had given Sabbatai the option of impalement, a firing squad of arrows, or conversion to Islam. By the next day, Sabbatai donned a turban and publicly converted. The Sultan would rename Sabbatai to Muhammad Effendi. This was a major blow to the Jewish community. A few hundred of Sabbatai's followers also converted to show their solidarity. These Jewish Muslims were called Donme, or converts, the first sect of crypto-Jews. They would retreat to Salonika, where they remain to this day. Zevi would pass away by 1676. The Sabbatean movement would go underground, moving into numerous secret societies, adopting various religions, but still retaining their Kabbalistic beliefs. Salonika became a breeding ground for Masonic activity, and is where the Young Turk movement, which would help bring down the Ottoman Empire, began. There is a lot of evidence to show that anti-Islamic dictator and first president of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal, or Ataturk, was a crypto-Jewish Donma, and even a descendant of Sabbatai himself. In the book The Donma Jews, D. Mustafa Turan writes, the Muhammad Ibrahim Abdul Wahhab, founder of revivalist Islamic movement Wahhabism, is a descendant of Donma from Turkey. Wahhab's grandfather Suleiman was actually named Shulman from the Turkish community of Bursa. After being expelled for practicing sorcery in Damascus, he fled to Egypt and fathered Wahhab. This claim is echoed in The Origins of the Saudi Wahhabis by Rafat Salim Kabar. In fact, it appears that much of the Saudi family has Jewish ancestry. According to the Wahhabi movement, The Truth and Roots by Abdul Wahab Ibrahim al-Shamari, Ibrahim Saud descends from Mordecai bin Ibrahim bin Mushi, a Jew from Basra. Abdul Wahab himself claims that in 1943, then Saudi ambassador Abdullah bin Ibrahim al-Mufadel paid 35,000 jinni to forge a family tree connecting them to the Prophet Muhammad. These claims are not verified, but considering the controversial role Wahhabism plays in Islam, along with intel documents released from the Department of Defense, a report in 2002 shows that the Iraqi government was aware of the Wahhabist activity to undermine Islam. "50 years after Sabbatai's death, Jacob Frank is born around 1726 into a Sabbatean family in Poland. Frank claimed to be a combination of the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi and Abraham's grandson Jacob. Frank's form of Sabbateism violated and perverted many of the laws and customs of Judaism, such as wife swapping and orgies. Frank took on the persona of the new Messiah and moved to Podolia, Ukraine. Like Sabbateans, Frank's movement gained the attention of many, including senior rabbis who forced him out of Podolia because of his heresy. In 1756, the sex magic rituals earned Frank and his followers excommunicated status for all impenitent heretics. This was when Frank would publicly declare that he was Zevi's true successor and that God had instructed him and his followers to convert to Christianity. Yet just like the Dolma, the Frankists would conceal their Kabbalistic mysticism. Frank was baptized on September 17, 1759, and again the next day, overseen by Augustus III, who represented Frank as his godfather. By the year 1790, 26,000 Jews had converted to Christianity. Much of the clergy still remained suspicious of Frank, and on February 6, 1760, Frank was witnessed preaching heresy and was arrested. This earned him a martyr-like status amongst his followers. The Frankist movement, like the Sabbateans, were trying to usher in the Messiah, using ideas from the Talmud, which states that the appearance of the Messiah comes only when people are either all good or all evil. They believed it was easier to be sinful and committed to it, and could still achieve God's will. Frankism teaches that evil exists only in the mind of the Gentile. God's right hand is considered good, and that which Gentiles perceive as evil from the left hand. This way of thinking would allow for such behavior as murder, rape, incest, consuming of blood, sexual promiscuity, and a host of other perversions. If the masses engaged in this behavior, it would quicken the return of the Messiah. Kabbalism views evil as essential to divinity, and not apart from God. Exploring the underworld leads to a dissolution of ego. The greater the evil, the greater potential for good. This is likely why much of our media promotes such division.
Well, I said it was evil, and they said it was good. There was a book that I had just come across called Lilith's Cave, which is a book of Jewish mysticism and supernatural. And there's a lot in that book that relates to what I, endured when I was a child.
Years later, when Jacob Frank was born in Poland and converted his Jews to Catholicism, but originally was Muslim. I was at a conference in New York, and a Turkish lady came up to me and thanked me for all the things the wonderful Turkish Jews have been doing to make their country so prosperous. And I said, what are you talking about? There's 50,000 Jews in Turkey. She said, there's millions. She said, our whole ruling class are Jews. I said, no, they're not. She says, they are so. They've been Jews ever since the days of Shabtai Tzvi. I said, oh, God, is it that serious?
The Frankists would now turn their attention towards international politics, implementing emissaries to the Russian government and the Eastern Orthodox Church, combining their efforts in overthrowing Poland and the Catholic Church.
Jacob Frank was your second Messiah. That's what he was called. The second Messiah of the Jew was Jacob Frank. And he worked from 1750, died in 1791, born in 1726. Yeah, those are about the right dates. What he did was he convinced the bishop of his diocese that his people were not Jews, they were anti-Talmudists. And the bishop bought it. And he ordered all the Talmuds of the diocese burnt. And then he said, I'll bring you lots and lots of new Catholics. He brought him 5,000 to be mass converted to Catholicism. I believe the year was 1859. 1759. All of a sudden, Europe's Jews, by the many thousands, were becoming Catholic publicly. They despised Catholicism, but privately they were Sabbatean. And as fantastic as it seems, there really, really are conspiracies of silence. If the rules are you don't open your mouth, you don't open your mouth, they exist. The Sabbateans didn't just exist as a tiny little cult. They were being converted by the thousands in the 18th century. The purification of the soul was very anti-Jewish. It was a very bad thing. There, to qualify this, he expanded Shabtai Tzvi into really a cult And it was no different than a cult today where you control the minds of people through sex. Just leave it at that.
Despite the rapid growth of the Frankist movement internationally, Frank himself was suffering financial problems, and by 1786 moved to Offenbach near Frankfurt.
Frankfurt was also the home of Mayor Amschel Rothschild and the home of someone named Adam Weishaupt. Little by little, for those unacquainted with this piece of history, the Rothschilds are the Sabbateans of the world, and here is why. There was a meeting that took place apparently in Rothschild's humble home then. In 1786, he was not all that wealthy. He was a coin dealer. His sons made him wealthy. His 5 sons expanded a business. The business was to control the economies of nations and thus control the nations. He found a magnificent formula. If we can get hold of the nations' economies, we've got the nations. He sat with Jacob Frank, who wanted the Jews to become non-Jews. He wanted them to become Sabbateans. He wanted them to accept the real Messiah of the Jews, Shabtai Tzvi, and incidentally, and the second Messiah, Jacob Frank. That's one of this little 3-pointed triangle. That's one point. Adam Weishaupt was the founder of something called the Illuminati. Now, this is a word that in this world of conspiracy has taken immense turns and twists. It was the Vatican. He was a Jesuit-trained priest, Adam Weishaupt. He was not Jewish. There are claims that he was not. Their goal, the Illuminati's goal, was to turn back the Protestant Reformation. And believe it or not, the best thing that happened to the Jews was the Protestant Reformation. The Illuminati wanted the Catholic Church to be the head of Christendom. They despised Lutheranism. They despised the Anglican Church. They wanted to weaken their societies and weaken their nations so that Rome would once again be at the head of international Christendom. That's what the Illuminati was and is. Now the point is that in order to bring a new Jew, a Jew that accepts Shabtai Tzvi as the Messiah, in order to get a new Christian who rejects the Anglican Church, who rejects the Lutheran Church and goes back to Rome, and by the way, the Eastern Church were involved too. Anyone who did not accept Rome as the central capital of Christendom was a target. What they did, quite simply, was they had to overturn the existing societies. And unfortunately for us Jews, they did a real job.